Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Uncensored CMO. Now, it turns out that Humour is back at Cannes, ladies and gentlemen. We've been waiting a long time for it, but it's finally back here again. So what better person for me to talk to on this episode of the Uncensored CMO than everyone's favourite cartoonist, the Marketoonist himself, Tom Fishburne. I'm delighted. And in fact, we flew him over to stay the entire week as our resident cartoonist to observe what's going on at Cannes and to do daily cartoons about it. Also to say in this episode as well, if you'd like to see those cartoons, please head over to YouTube where you'll be able to see them as we talk about them. So do check it out over on YouTube. And also, if you'd like a copy of my t-shirt here, which says Another Black t-shirt, which featured in the Extraordinary Cost of Being Dull presentation that Adam and I did in the Palais, then let me know and we'll try and get some over to you. This is a great episode. It's lots of fun. It's very funny too. I know you're going to love it. Here it is. Tom, welcome to Uncensored CMO.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, obviously, we're working under very stressful conditions here in the south of France, aren't we? But
it's a hardship tour.
It's a tough one, but I couldn't resist the temptation to get you over here to be our cartoonist in residence. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, I love it.
But maybe let's start off with the origin story. So how did you end up becoming a cartoonist? Because you used to work in marketing, didn't you?
That's right.
Before. So tell us the origin story.
If it really starts as a child, I used to love cartoons. Like a lot of us, I read cartoons all the time. I used to draw cartoons. I used to trace them. In the US, they have something called Silly Putty where you can put it on newsprint and transfer it. And I would take my favorite cartoons and then I'd just erase the words and make new cartoons out of that. So I loved cartoons. And then when I got older, I just stopped doing as much of it. I found myself in business school and suddenly there was a student newspaper and I was surrounded by all this great content, things that were funny. And there was a need to put something in the paper. And a friend of mine encouraged me to draw a cartoon and I did it. I got hooked. I did it for 2 years while I was in business school. And then from there, my summer internship between the 2 years of business school, I went to work at General Mills. I had worked in agencies before, and suddenly I found myself in a brand management environment, largest company I'd ever worked for. And again, I found myself surrounded by great material, and I thought it was entertaining. And I found myself, though, in this giant company feeling like I had to kind of like repress a bit of who I was and like fit in, because I was less comfortable with my analytical skills than I was my creativity. And so I kind of like tried to adapt myself. And at the end of the summer, my manager had a performance review where she said, "We would like you to come back full time. Here's your performance review." And under development areas, it said creativity. And I said, that's creativity is kind of my thing. Like I do this cartoon in business school, I think of myself as being pretty creative. And he said, a lot of people think they're creative.
No way.
And I realized that he was right. I was so scared to show that side of myself. I hit it. And I think I've since learned, I think a lot of people do that, and particularly early in their careers, they kind of hide parts of themselves. And so when I joined full-time, I decided I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to try to show up as my full self. And I started drawing a cartoon about marketing within a few weeks of starting there. I sent it to a few coworkers and had a sign-up feature. And then within a few weeks, I had a few hundred subscribers and then a few thousand, and then it just started to blow up from there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you sent that former boss a cartoon?
I haven't. I should do.
You should frame it.
He really did me a service because I needed that pointed out to me, that how I think of myself. When you're self-editing all the time, your best ideas are just in your head. You need to kind of get past that. And it really helped. And then early on, I was sharing the story with you earlier. I got a call from the assistant to the chief marketing officer at General Mills, big hierarchical company. The executive wing is a totally different building. They wore ties over there. And so all of my friends thought that I would be fired for my cartoons because I'd been, particularly in those days, I would occasionally sneak in what a senior executive looked like.
Oh, I see. Could they recognize themselves in the cartoon?
I don't know if they did, but other people did.
Oh, it was a bit of a nod to everyone else. Yeah. We know what's going on.
There was this moment, a friend of mine described it as prairie dogging, because I'd send out a cartoon during the workday and people's heads would pop up over the cubicle and talk about them.
Who's he talking about now?
Really, this is funny. We're talking about the stuff that we're going through, but surely Tom is going to get fired for this. So I march off to the chief marketing officer's office, and I'd met him during the interviews, but I didn't know him that well. But instead of firing me, he told me he really wanted to just get to know me better and that he loved the cartoons. He was excited I was doing it. And he said, you're talking about things that need to be talked about, and humor can give us a way to talk about some of those things. And if ever there was like a origin nexus, it was that conversation, because I felt like I had carte blanche to just run with it. And now it's been 22 years of sending it out every week.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you said something quite interesting there about humor allows us to talk about something difficult. And it does play a role, doesn't it? Like, kind of easing people or breaking a kind of awkward moment or kind of getting people comfortable with the situation. But tell us more about the role that humor can play in organizations and in business more generally.
Yeah, it's a bit of an emperor has no clothes moment. Like a lot of times we all see things and we're kind of waiting for someone else to notice it. Or I found myself in a hierarchical company where you'd be in a conference room, somebody would present something and everybody looks at the most senior person to speak first. And then you go down the chain and everybody's holding something back. And humor lets us kind of like hold something up. It gives us permission. So it's disarming, but it's also this thing, I think, that's a bit of, it can be an act of empathy because you're all connecting on something. There's this old vaudeville quote that laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And so it's kind of this connection. And when you're all seeing it together, then I feel like it also has this community effect. All of those are really good things, but sometimes companies are scared to have, think about humor. They think of it as frivolous or whatever. But
I think the best ones are to make observations that we all know but don't say. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? And that's what makes them funny, isn't it? It's that shared collective experience of, oh yeah,
yes,
I've been in that situation,
totally. And I don't think you have to be a stand-up comedian, but you just have to be willing to like point it out.
Yeah.
And it goes a long way. And I think particularly when somebody senior in an organization does that, it sets the tone that everybody else can do that too.
Yeah, totally. So obviously you had a full-time job. You were doing the cartoons on the side, which is fantastic. And you got permission to do that, which is brilliant. I mean, a bit like me on the podcast, really. It's been wonderful kind of being able to do both. At some point, though, you must have had to make a decision to go full-time into being the Marketoonist as a profession. How did that transition happen? And when did you know that the time was right for you to make the big leap?
It's great. It was a bit accidental. I think in some ways it was helpful that I didn't try to immediately make this into my life's work because the pressure would have been crazy. Instead, I'm just thinking about the next cartoon in the next week. For me, it became a form of creative exercise. It forced me to pay attention to what was out there. And after I'd been doing it for a long time, some places were more sympathetic to it than others. I worked one place where my manager said if he ever ended up in a cartoon, I would be fired.
Really?
And I mentioned that story to another place I was joining later on. And he said, if I don't end up in a cartoon, you'll be fired.
You'll be fired.
Yeah. So I was like, it's kind of a barometer for a good environment for me to be. But it became a part of who I was. But I just didn't think of it in the terms of this could actually be a job. And then I found myself, I started to get a lot of requests to create custom things for brands because a lot of people reading my work were marketers. They had marketing budgets. And occasionally I would do them if they were interesting. And I finally found myself thinking maybe this could be something more. I ended up having an interaction with David Hyatt, he's
been on the podcast.
Oh, great!
Yeah, founder of the Do Lectures.
Yes, Do Lectures, and with his wife Hyatt Denham.
Hyatt Denham.
And brilliant. I feel like he's sort of we don't actually interact very often, but I think of him as a mentor because of how he talks about entrepreneurship. And he had this wonderful reference point that I found really inspiring as an answer to a question from someone: when is the right time to take an entrepreneurial leap? And he said he thought about it as a V1 marker, that when an airplane is on a runway and it's about to take off, it hits something called V1 speed and then it takes off. And he suggested that you should draw your own V1 marker. What would have to be true in order for you to finally take the leap? And so that helps me because I didn't have to think I'm going to jump and quit my job today. I thought, what would have to be true? And so I wrote my own V1 marker. I had sort of 4 criteria of willing to take the jump. Yeah. And I had, I wanted to have my cartooning revenue at half my salary. I wanted to have a business plan to get to the other half within a year. I wanted to have a financial cushion with the home equity line of credit. And I wanted the support of my amazing wife, Tally.
Yeah.
And suddenly I found myself at that point. And then it made it really easy. I was like, I'm at the V1 marker. It's time for me to take off.
What I love about that is that you looked at it objectively, right? What would have to be true for me to make the leap? I think so when we're about to make a big decision, we put it off, don't we? Because, our fear of failure is probably greater than our desire for success often, isn't it? And I know that I've been in a similar situation to you. I've not kind of quantifiably said, well, at this point I can do it. Yeah. And therefore we go, oh, if only I get one more job in corporate, or if only I tick that box over there, or I have a little bit more in my savings account. And then we give ourselves loads of excuses not to make the leap, don't we? And so I quite like the objectiveness of actually going, well, look, this is what needs to be true for it to work. And then I'm going to hold myself to account.
And people warned me that I would be tested with that. And in fact, a couple of weeks before I reached that point, I was just waiting for the paperwork of the home equity line of credit. My company offered me a big promotion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so the opportunity cost then had gone up, right? So
it shifted.
Yeah,
it shifted.
So
I really had to decide. And I heard that often the universe sort of tests you to see how badly you want it.
Oh, nice.
And so I ultimately did take the leap.
Well, I'm glad you did. I mean, imagine if you hadn't, right?
Yeah. I look back and I'm so thankful that it went down the way that
And
it
how
did.
many years had you been doing cartoons as a side hustle before that? So how much of a bank of, kind of work had you created already before you then did it full time?
It had been 8 years.
Really?
Most of the time not making anything financial out of it aside from what I was getting as just feeling creative and as an outlet. Yeah, it was 8 years of it, just experimentation. Yeah.
I think something that people forget. I did a little study in soft drinks years ago on innovation and how long it takes innovation to be successful. And I just limited myself to the top 20 innovation of the prior 10 years in soft drinks. And I looked at when they got to a scale that you might consider successful, right? And by successful, I meant a level at which they were sustainable. So they had enough turnover per store to maintain distribution. They were growing at a rate that allowed them to compete with bigger brands, that kind of thing. And what was fascinating is only looking at the top 20, the average time to success was 7 years.
Oh, brilliant.
I know. And it's a little game I used to play, actually. I used to say, when was Red Bull invented?
Yes.
And people would go, 2004. And then I'd tell them the real number, and it would be about 7 years before they thought.
Yes.
Because the point at which it becomes an overnight success, was usually there'd been years of distribution in pubs and no one had seen it, or they'd been in corner shops or whatever. And it's fascinating that it's very, very rare to have an innovation where in year one it just suddenly, explodes. And actually what I'd looked at was really interesting is the year one success versus the year 10 success. There's no correlation. So the ones that were big on year one, most of them had disappeared. Almost all of them had disappeared. The year 10 successes, one that had practiced and grown gradually and slowly over time and had perfected what they did. And it's a bit like you, isn't it? It's that 8 years of this is why I think side hustles are so good.
Yes.
Because you get to experiment, you get to learn, you get to improve, don't you? And you get to build a community so that you get to a point where you can hit the H1.
It's also sort of a bit of what yardstick are you measuring by? Those first eight years were a success to me by the yardstick I was measuring it by, which is that it gave me a creative outlet. I was hearing from all these amazing people all over the world. People still do this. They forget that I'm not on NDA with their company. They send me these great stories. Yeah. These great stories. And I feel like it made me feel as a marketing person that I wasn't alone struggling with some of these challenges I was struggling with, that we're all kind of going through it together. It made me, I really love the community and the connection with people who read the cartoons. And so it was a success. Then I added the financial lever. And I think by having it, it helped give me clarity on how to go forward and how to make decisions to make sure that I wasn't sacrificing why I was doing it to begin with.
And I think as well, the other thing I believe passionately is that humour's got a real role to play in the creative process itself. I mean, we talk about humour at Cannes and where are all the funny ads and bring back humour. But actually in the development of an idea, there's often a lot of banter and back and forward. And I mean, there's a David Ogilvy quote that I actually love, which is the best ideas come as jokes, try and make your thinking as funny as possible. And if I think about the best things I've been involved in, there's often started with a kind of an offhand comment. And one of our customers at System 1 is Specsavers. And I think they've made, I need to check more on the database, but one of the funniest ads of all time, which is basically this. So obviously Specsavers is equivalent to kind of Warby Parker, I suppose, in the US. They make affordable eyewear sort of thing. And they've got this wonderful ad where you've got a delivery driver who's dropping off a big kind of delivery. And it's at the very, very top of a really high rise of flats. And he's carrying it and you can see him sweating and it's getting harder to go up. And the music track is the Proclaimers, and I would walk 500 miles, and that sort of thing is going on. And you can see like the kids running past him and the bashing into the door as he gets up there. And he's there, he's dripping with sweat. He puts it down, he rings the doorbell, and then a woman comes out. She looks like she's just come out the shower and she's got her hair in a kind of thing. And she looks at the thing, goes, "Oh no, that's the block over the road." Should have gone Specsavers. But
brilliant, I love it.
But and what they've actually, the whole should have gone Specsavers idea, that started as a joke on set 22 years ago, where someone sort of offhand just go, "Oh well, they should have gone Specsavers, shouldn't they?" And that original joke ended up over time becoming the platform for the brand.
Yes.
It's a thing that people talk about. And it's even in, particularly in the UK, it'd be the sort of thing if someone make a joke, if you walk into a door, you go, "Oh, should have gone Specsavers." You know what I mean? So it's become something.
A cultural.
It has, yeah.
I feel like it's a great example too of why it's so important to have a culture like that inside. it sometimes gets overlooked. You know, we're doing sometimes serious work. We could take ourselves too seriously. And I feel like humor can be one of those things that can unlock an environment where you feel comfortable saying that out loud and not feeling like you have to self-edit it.
Yeah.
One quote I've always liked, this longtime Apple executive, Hiroki Asai, so that fear kills creativity and humor is our most powerful tool to drive fear out of the system.
That's so good.
And he used to challenge himself as an objective in every all hands meeting where we'd have the whole team there to have at least a few moments to get everybody to laugh in an all hands meeting. And it did a couple of things. It was sort of a way for him to connect with his team, but more importantly, it let him set a tone that everybody who worked there felt like that they could show up with their sense of humor and didn't have to self-edit. And I feel like that vibe is where great ideas come from.
100%. I mean, not to take it too far, but, you know, when we're going through COVID, every advertiser and business in the world felt this responsibility to be overly serious.
Yes.
Right? And it's really interesting. I mean, at System 1, we got asked by so many people, literally the moment it struck, everyone cut their advertising, stopped communicating, and basically said, "What can we say?" Right? And the default reaction was, "In these times, you know, nothing is normal
as we navigate the new normal."
New normal, all the kind of thing. You know, it's like suddenly everything became exactly the same. And what we found was, because we were testing throughout the throughout the COVID period, is that people that put a mirror up to society and showed everybody just how bad it was, just created that sadness and fear.
Yes.
But people that entertained, I mean, not necessarily were funny, because I mean, you know, there's a limit maybe to humor in that situation, but those that created escapism and were maybe a little, you know, self-deprecating or used humor entertainment, those actually saw a massive boost versus previously. So it's almost as if what we wanted was that human connection back. We wanted to kind of lighten the moment and get on with their lives and that sort of thing. So it's quite interesting that even in something serious, humor has a role to play.
In some ways, it's more important than ever in those moments. People don't need the reminders that life is really hard. It's about finding that connection. And I think it reflects a little bit of how sometimes there's an assumption that there's only one form of humor. Like around that time, I would often hear better too serious than sorry. And I think what happens sometimes, people think of humor and they think of the most aggressive shock jock comedian they know. And they think, I don't want our brand to be affiliated with that kind of humor. When in reality, humor is innate, it's human. And there's so many different types of it. There's kind of a spectrum from aggressive humor to affiliative humor, where you're laughing at something, you're laughing with others. And laughing with others, even when times are tough, when done appropriately, can be incredibly powerful. And because other brands often take that uniform approach the other direction, it can be even more effective because you stand out from all of the common, the cost of dull.
Yes, indeed. We're talking about laughing with. I thought I'll tell you something that we found out at System 1. So when we measure emotion, we measure happiness, which we discover is the most important emotion to create in the audience. Now, happiness breaks down into 15 different types of emotion. So, you know, pride or joy, you know, there's lots of different kinds of emotion. We measure it all through our test. Amusement is the second most powerful of the happiness emotions. And we've measured the correlation between the different types of emotions and short and long-term sales. So we can even go down to how effective is humor as a tactic in it turns out it's number 2. Any guesses what the number 1 is?
Boy, that's tough. I don't even know how you would describe it, but maybe something that's like, I don't know what the word is, but when you're in a room and everybody kind of laughs together, like there's an out loud laugh reaction. I don't know what you would even call that, but I might point at that.
Almost the opposite. Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, like a recognition.
So a laughing at someone else's misfortune.
That's like the great quote, tragedy plus time equals humor.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. One of my other favorite ads, actually from Specsavers, they had this brilliant scene with a veterinary surgeon, right? And the surgeon is doing this operation on a cat and basically can't find the pulse. And so hits the kind of emergency button to go, no, I need help sort of thing. They flood in to try and do the resuscitation and then look at him, and it turns out it's a fur hat. And someone just left it there sort of thing. Should have gone to Specsavers kind of thing. But, you know, brilliant example. So they do it very well. I should mention, actually, for anyone watching, you've written a book here, which has got one of my favourite cartoons of yours here. Which, if you can't see this, basically everyone listening, but it basically is a big poster with your ad ignored here.
Yeah.
I think the modern adaptation of that would be your ad, as seen on LinkedIn, discussed by a few thousand marketers commenting on it.
Yes,
sort of thing.
exactly.
It's funny about this. Like, for some reason, out of home seems to be more of a LinkedIn kind of tool to demonstrate how creative you are.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Well, it's big, it's open, and yes, exactly. But it is funny to see how billboard ads show up. I certainly, like, the few times my cartoons have ended up in billboard ads, I save those photos.
You've had cartoons in billboard ads before,
I have.
Have you?
I have outdoor display ads. One of the more interesting ones, I went to speak in India for the first time, and the organizer thought it'd be fun to take some of my cartoons and put them in billboard ads across Mumbai. And I don't know quite how effective it was, because it takes a moment to read the ad, and that's one of the funny things about outdoor as a medium, is that
2 seconds
people cram in too much into it, thinking people are going to stop whatever they're doing. Or my favorite, actually, is sometimes where you see an outdoor ad and it has a QR code on it on the side of a moving bus, as if someone's going to take out their phone and chase the bus down the street to see what that's all about.
Wait, stop the bus, ring the bell.
So I don't know how many people actually read the cartoon long enough to get the humor out of it, but it was fun to see.
The other thing I think people do as well is, I call it the Indra Nooyi media buy, right? Mm-hmm. So when I worked at Pepsi, Indra Nooyi would do these kind of royal tours of different markets, and so literally be panic stations, because I worked for Britvic, the distributor for PepsiCo, and she'd be having a tour. I think she had a tour for the London Olympics or something, and somebody literally worked out the route her car would take, and we had to do these deals with kind of like JC to go, we'd like to buy specifically the route on the A12, then on the A414, going into central London on this. So she'd be staying at this hotel, so could you please make sure the digital billboards of this? Will you go into the shops either side and take all the Coke out of the shops and put Pepsi into the fridge in case she wants to go out for a cold drink at night? So, it was just it was like this royal tour where we had to kind of like buy all this media. The millions that must have got wasted just trying to impress the CEO.
I've seen that happen so many times. It's so funny. The pockets that these power, like the areas have, that most people would never realize. That was my favorite. When I worked at General Mills, there was this suburb outside of General Mills called Eden Prairie, and many of the focus groups were held at Eden Prairie. And so I heard one of our agency partners describe the oracles of Eden Prairie once as if we create this ad, and you're going to take it up high on the mountain to bring it to the oracles of Eden Prairie to tell us if we should move forward with this or not.
So there's some very wealthy residents that are basically getting paid $100 every single day to turn up and give an opinion on that.
And have no idea that their particular focus group of 8 people has a complete over-indexed voice in the decision-making of that company.
When we're talking about the trends at Cannes, we're actually talking about the
focus group. Prairie. They should be here.
I know, exactly. They're the jury. We'll send them in. Well, look, talking about cartoons, I'd love to talk through some of your greatest hits.
Yeah, love it.
But maybe let's start with, what's the cartoon that maybe had the biggest difference to your trajectory? So was there like a breakout cartoon or a tipping point cartoon where you went, oh, hang on a minute, so this is starting to get some reach now?
There's one moment that really comes to mind, because for a long time I was drawing these cartoons about my marketing job for other marketers, and some of them were quite inside jokes. I'd hear from people not in marketing, I don't quite get that, I don't know what that stands for, and that was fine with me, and in many ways still is. I like to have cartoons that are widely understandable, but I do like to have the inside jokes. I find it interesting, and it makes me feel part of the community too. But there was a moment when Internet of Things was suddenly becoming a topic, and I drew a cartoon. It had somebody talking to a coworker saying, I think my Nest smoke alarm is going off. Google AdWords just pitched me a fire extinguisher and an offer for temporary housing.
That's brilliant.
And it was just at the moment people were wondering what it was like to have Google owning these things. And it just hit at the right moment. And I didn't realize how much it would tap into the zeitgeist, but it happened to be a few weeks before the Davos conference, and it really made the rounds there. And I saw a lot of people talking about it at Davos, and it made me feel like actually people are talking about this topic, and to do it with a little bit of humor actually provides a vehicle to do that, because you can share it in a way. It was a way to sort of comment more broadly on the issues. Yeah. And that was one of those moments where I thought, hold on, maybe some of these moments where people are wondering what the next stage is, humor can be a great platform.
Yeah.
To give people a vehicle to talk, to address difficult or complex topics.
Well, it's one of those things that's constantly debated on LinkedIn is this the next big thing or not?
Yeah.
I think it's just all over. You gave me a slide slight PTSD, I have to say, when you're talking about Internet of Things. I randomly, for about 40 minutes, ended up becoming a world expert in Internet of Things unintentionally. So I was the marketing director at Luxo, Robin and Centauri a few years ago, and it was I think our CEO was supposed to speak at a private dinner for sort of other senior execs, and it was a marketing topic, and he couldn't make it, and he said to me, "Oh, John, could you go and sort of do the talk on?" I can't even remember what the talk was. Maybe it was creative. I don't know. Maybe it's creativity or something marketing related. Even though it was my birthday, because I remember this for two reasons, right? Because it was actually my birthday. I just started at the company and I felt I couldn't tell my boss that I wasn't going to stand in for him just because it's my birthday sort of thing. I got in so much trouble at home. But I mean, anyway, but I went along. And anyway, I remember it was 6th September when my birthday was. Anyway, so I turn up at this thing. We sit down. I'm at the head of the table. You've got these very sort of powerful people kind of sat down there. We have a lovely starter. And then the person at the other end of the table is going, "I'm delighted to introduce us to one of the world experts on the Internet of Things." And I'm just like, what do I do? And in that moment, I think, okay, do I fess up that I've had the starter, got tucked into the Chateau Neuf de Pape and like exit stage left? What do I do? I'm thinking there's been a mistake. So I sat there and said, ask not what Internet of Things can do for you. Ask what you can do for the Internet of Things. So I'd like to start by throwing this back to the audience. And maybe we could go around one by one and go, what can the Internet of Things do for you?
Fantastic.
Because as a consumer-led person, I believe that we start with the customer. Make what will sell, not sell what you can make. So I'd like to start to my left here. So I basically ran a focus group on the Internet of Things and came back and said, and then they said, would you like to sum up with your observations of where this is going? And I basically said, we need to start with the need, not start with the solution. And I got this round of applause at the end, and then I exited as fast as I could before they knew kind of what on earth I was doing, sort of thing. And it turns out I got the wrong date. I turned up the right day, but the wrong month. And it was this like monthly rotation of speakers in the same room at the same time. So I just turned up a month early to this thing. And obviously whoever's supposed to be there didn't turn up. So I mean, how crazy was that?
Amazing.
So for 40 minutes, I was a world expert on Internet of Things, having known nothing. I probably still made more sense than the rest of them combined, actually.
I like your approach, I have to say.
All right, so where do we go from here? What was your take us to your next most famous cartoon?
So this one is more of a marketing sort of joke. I have somebody, two people in a supermarket, and there's one of those classic signs that say "You are here," but on the sign is a customer funnel, which goes from awareness to trial to repeat to loyalty. You are here to a sign and a store manager pointing at it that the customer is here, and the customer is saying, "Actually, I'm just looking for the bathroom."
That's brilliant.
And I like having, I think Humour could hold up the mirror, which I think we need, but particularly in marketing, to get out of the ivory tower, to think about how like the actual people buying our products don't think about it as nearly as much as we think that they do. And I feel like we often think ourselves, I mean, a marketing funnel can be really helpful, but we can get funnel vision where we think about as if our consumers are these shoppers on a transactional path to purchase rather than complex people. And so I think it's an evergreen thing for us to remember, because it's very easy to use the frameworks and tools and things that we have to think about our shoppers a certain linear way, and we miss the big picture.
Can you imagine going up to someone and saying, are you in the consideration stage or the purchase intent stage? Are you a loyal customer returning for a second time?
Yes.
And I think technology makes this worse, doesn't it? Because with technology, we think we know, and we can identify exactly where people are in the process and supposedly nudge them along. I love Tom Roach, actually, big quote of Tom Roach here, because he sort of did a bit of reinvention of the funnel, and it was very, very basic framework. But what he said is that most people are not in the market, the kind of 95-5 rule, right? Yeah. Most people are not about to decide to buy your thing at this moment. So actually your job is, he calls it building, which is establishing memories and associations with your brand, so that at some point in the future, and you don't know when that is. I mean, this is what drives me crazy, is it might be a day, it might be a year, it might be 10 years, you don't know. And then he calls it kind of nudging the next bit in the funnel, which is the 5%. So, when you're close to purchase, then you need to be trying to sort of nudge people over the line. And then the third bit is kind of connecting and making it easy to buy. So don't take away any barriers to purchase and kind of make it easy. I much prefer that, because like that's sort of how normal people do things, isn't
Yes,
it? You know,
yes.
when you're thinking of buying a new car, suddenly the features and benefits of that car become awfully important.
Yes,
The
yes.
color, the metallic, and the air conditioning, you know, all those things make it different. The rest of the time, don't care, you know?
100%.
It's more about, you know, how do I feel about the brand, and do I spot other ones on the road, and
Yes.
do I think I'd look cool in it? You know, it's that kind of thing. But anyway, so the funnel's a brilliant one. And it doesn't go away, that debate, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's fun. It's amazing for us in marketing. We're all also consumers. Like, we experience the other side of this. When I remember, well, as General Mills, the CMO I was speaking about earlier, Mark Addix, he was a brilliant mentor and often would encourage us to try to break out of that ivory tower.
Yeah.
And he used to say, whenever you shift to a new brand assignment, which at the junior end at General Mills was every year, he said, take out an empty notebook, fill it full of everything you think you know about the category then, before you're corrupted by all the great industry knowledge we're going to give you, shopper decision trees and category management decks, and here are the rules of the category. Here's how people shop the category. He said, do that.
Yeah.
And then when you're on the brand, periodically make sure you're walking in a store and just sit there and watch how people actually shop your category, how they look at it.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because my one contribution to marketing science is I invented something called the marketing bottom. So it's basically a massive U shape. And if you imagine that on the y-axis is amount you understand about the customer, length of time you've been in marketing, right? So as a complete novice, right, you're actually really good because you react, you know, of course everyone goes, you know, no one watches the ads or whatever, you know what I mean? You know, your granny could tell you, like, you know, why she decides on what she kind of buys or whatever. And you're like that. And you go, of course you'd be this. But then then you absorb all the nonsense, you know, all the kind of funnels and, you know, kind of weird, you know, kind of performance marketing terms, all that kind of thing. And then you get corrupted until you reach a bottom. And then you sort of start learning how it should be. And you eventually escape, and you kind of end up where you start.
You do.
You know, oh, I'm thinking like a consumer again. Yes. Or I'm spending time with actual people that might actually buy my products.
Absolutely.
You know, they don't act like I thought they did.
I found when I started at General Mills, we used to have Nielsen practically surgically attached to our faces, which our Nielsen share at any moment.
Yeah.
And the way they looked at Nielsen share for Cheerios, the brand I was on, was in a category called RTE cereal. RTE stands for ready to eat cereal, which when it was created was different than oatmeal, which wasn't ready to eat. But no consumer ever thinks about it that way. And they're not even thinking about you within that category at all. They're thinking like, am I going to go to Starbucks or am I going to get a bowl of cereal?
Yeah.
But when you're looking at, you know, your slight share changes with what you think your competition is in RTE cereal, you miss everything.
It's funny how we name things, actually. I remember one of my friends had worked in margarine, and they call the category yellow fat. And so she was actually the head of yellow fat. I was just like, that is bonkers. And I also, and I heard another story that a Kit Kat, they have a 2-fingered brand manager and a 4-fingered brand manager.
Oh God, that is wonderful. I love that so much.
We assign these random terms, kind of industry terms about how it's produced or something, and become the, you know, you wouldn't say I work for the plastic bottle company with brown fizzy liquid inside.
Yes, and you need to. That's where humor can help to point out these things. I remember when I worked in the ice cream business, and one of our suppliers, the name of the company was Mr. Cookie Face, and was quite a hard negotiator. And we had a very serious meeting. We were talking about our negotiating terms with Mr. Cookie Face, and I couldn't believe that nobody in the room was laughing about.
That's brilliant. I love that. You know, I think maybe when you arrive at a meeting, right, you should have this amazing kind of amazing music in the elevator as you come up. You should be welcomed with like kind of like drums and cymbals or something, you see, because you know how you feel. Humor makes you, you know, humor and music, it makes you feel great, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, imagine how good every meeting would be if you started it with a joke of the day.
100%.
You know, it would lift everything.
It's the best thing a leader can do.
Yeah, totally. So the next, what I want to move on to is shiny new things as well, which is another one that sort of tickled me a bit.
Yeah, this is one I actually have. I have a few of my cartoons framed to my own wall, but this one
it made the wall.
It made the cut. So it has a bunch of dogs around a table, and one is saying, "We need to stay focused on our marketing priorities and not get distracted by every shiny new look squirrel." And there's a squirrel outside of the window, and all the dogs are looking at the squirrel. And that's an evergreen thing. The squirrel may change, but the squirrel is always there. Particularly,
I think
in
you could update this one annually, couldn't you? Like you
100%.
probably just need to repeat this one every single year, and it will still be true by the time you retire, won't it?
It's all the hardest thing in marketing to know what you know when something pops up and everybody's talking about it. Is this something I should pay attention to? Is it something that's going to, a year from now, people are going to be saying, why do we waste so much time on that? And marketing is really at that point where this comes up a lot. And there's a lot of groupthink around it. And I think another example where I think we need humor to poke it, fun it.
Yeah.
Where it can be a bit absurd.
Yeah. No, groupthink's absolutely right, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you tell whether something is kind of like, going to go away tomorrow night sort of thing, or whether it's going to fundamentally change everything, or even it's going to change everything for a short period of time and then not, like COVID, for example.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I did a cartoon at the start of COVID. This one was another sea change moment, because it was in that period of time that you talked about where everything was dour and serious. And I would hear things like, better too serious than sorry. And yet I felt like I was hearing from people, please don't stop drawing these cartoons. Or just hearing from people when I would send out a cartoon, thanks for a little moment of levity. And so I drew a cartoon with a bunch of executives around a table saying, digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. And then there's this wrecking ball outside the window with the words COVID-19 on the side of it. And I feel like it hit like a thunder blast, like in terms of where I saw my cartoon popping up. And I think partly because everybody had to do things so quickly, like we had to take things that were going to take years and suddenly it was months or weeks. Like it was a moment. But I also think there was something about feeling like discombobulated. This huge wrecking ball is coming toward the window.
Yeah.
And you have no choice but to figure out how to adapt to it. And it was a real moment. There's this, Scott Brinker in the US has this lovely quote that technology changes exponentially, organizations change logarithmically. And I feel like there's this friction between those two things that is ongoing. It's not just a moment like COVID. It's, ChatGPT is the most recent wrecking ball. And how do you adapt to that? Organizations are logarithmic changers. So how do you deal with that? And so I feel like those moments of change are particular times where a leader needs to have a great culture in place, so that teams can talk about the challenges, because there's no roadmap in those moments.
Yeah.
And so you need to be open and have everything on the table and talk about what's keeping in the way and holding you back.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Actually, it's similar. I met the chief brand officer at Gymshark, which is one of the UK's most successful kind of startups, now a unicorn. And he was saying your personal growth needs to be ahead of the growth trajectory of your company.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like it's inverting that insight, really, which is you need to be, because he was just explaining that there are some people in the company that have been there 8-10 years with the same job title, and basically when they say, "Oh, we want to raise" or whatever, said, "No, your role has grown." Has grown as fast as you have, kind of thing, because the business is in a completely different scale. But it's a good challenge, isn't it? To be thinking, growing ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Personally, as it were. We should, of course, talk about, in terms of Wrecking Ball, AI, shouldn't we? And I know particular cartoon. I love this. Probably my favorite cartoon of yours. It does make me smile. But explain the AI cartoon.
Yeah, so this is a 2-panel cartoon, and I drew this right after ChatGPT sort of was suddenly, became the fastest selling consumer product of all time. Two panels. On the left-hand side, somebody is showing a colleague his computer monitor saying, AI turns this single bullet point into a long email I can pretend I wrote. And in the other panel, it's an inverse flip side of different people, but looking at it, AI makes a single bullet point out of this long email I can pretend I read.
That's brilliant.
And it's the two sides
absolutely
of
freaking brilliant.
AI written, AI read. And I think one of the conundrums we have with this incredibly powerful new technology, like, hey, what is the real root of what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And are you creating something that's really meaningful, or are you creating, infinite words that nobody wants?
Totally. I think this is the problem we've got, right? Because, we're at Cannes, we've been talking about AI and creativity, and we're talking about productivity and the amount we can create at scale, we can create faster, we can create more personalized, we can do so much more. There's still the same number of people out there. Yeah. People are already overexposed to advertising messages. People are already bored by what we're currently saying.
That's right.
And ignoring us, right? People are paying to not see your ads.
Yes.
And we're now going to times it by 100.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yes.
And the other thing, of course, we know from, the presentation Adam Morgan and I were giving on the extraordinary cost of dial is AI is accelerating the homogenization, the averaging of everything as well.
100%.
So, you can now do boring advertising at scale. So back to your ad ignored here, your ad ignored everywhere.
Yes.
Repeatedly.
Yes.
To everyone.
It's the great samening. It's this this whole averaging out over time.
Yeah. So I can't help thinking that actually right now we need more humanity, more humor. And I think that's going to make you even more distinctive. Actually, interesting aside, it's a slight tangent here, but I was at the LinkedIn CMO panel on Tuesday, just hosting a discussion. Just before I was talking, their chief economist was giving using all their data they collect globally, talking about trends in terms of hiring trends, skills changes, that kind of thing. And she made a really interesting observation, which was like, obviously, use of generative AI is going up in terms of skills being looked for by employers. There were 5 other skills that are increasing at the same rate as generative AI. They're all people skills: leadership, problem solving, creativity, communication.
Yes.
It's literally as fast as we can automate.
Yes.
The opposite is happening at the same time, which is we need people that can lead people, bring humanity and all that kind of thing. I just thought, that gives me a little bit of hope, actually.
Absolutely.
The role will be for the kind of creative types, the people, people that can lead people, and not just the people that can code. Because effectively coding is dead now, isn't it? Right? Because AI will take care of the productivity for you.
100%.
So we are in Cannes, right? And you very kindly agreed, didn't you, to come all the way over here, spend a week with us here in our amazing villa here. Anyone watching can kind of see it behind you, can't see it behind me. There is a beautiful view out here, by the way, for anyone wondering. There's you can't see it on camera, but there is an amazing vista of the Mediterranean. There's lots of swanky yachts going, but a few helicopters. I'm surprised.
Me too. I saw I counted at least 4 today.
I know the amount of helicopters buzzing in. Anyway, but one day, Rodney, we'll get to do that. But yeah, tell us about your experience with Cannes. How's it been?
Oh, fantastic. It was amazing. It had been on my bucket list forever, obviously, just as I knew of this nexus of interesting people and creative, et cetera. But I always imagined that most of the activity happened sort of inside, the center, the official speeches. And what the biggest surprise for me, particularly just walking around the peripheral, the most interesting things are the conversations on the outside. In many cases, the opportunity to meet people who I've perhaps had some exchanges with in the past, at least I knew their work, and suddenly having the opportunity to have direct one-on-one conversations with them or small group conversations. Those have been really interesting, and I've really appreciated that opportunity. Yeah. It's been very cool.
I heard this. I can't remember who said the phrase, but they're absolutely spot on. That Cannes is a B2B trade show, and
Yes.
it makes a lot of sense because originally people came for the awards. Mm-hmm. And then, then media companies came to try and win some media off the advertisers who were here collecting the awards.
Yes.
And then ad tech decided, well, if media's going to be here, we're going to come and sell ad tech to the media suppliers, sort of thing.
Yes.
And then even now we've got like creators coming that say, we want to try and convince the media companies and the advertisers to kind of put us on, kind of thing. So and then you've got celebrity talent coming, well, we're going to get paid a lot of money to kind of go to party on Spotify Beach. So it's kind of grown and grown and grown. But if effectively it's a trade show.
Yes.
That just happens to have a few awards in the basement,
right.
kind of the Palais. But you went into the Palais and actually looked at the work, didn't you?
I did.
Which, by the way, congratulations on that. You're probably one in the 1% that actually did that.
There weren't as many people there as I thought. Actually, I was a little surprised by that. I thought that the work would be front and center at it, but I saw some great examples of campaigns and work, and that was really fun. They did offer tours there, so I overheard a few of the tours.
That.
Yes. So they walked through a few of the categories, but I was amazed. There's so much creativity put into it. There's so many different categories, and it can be challenging. It can be overwhelming because there's the sheer number of submissions, and there's sometimes the actual tiny poster of the work. You really have to get up to it to see actually the big idea that's behind it. But it was great to see.
You do, and you made a cartoon out of that, of course.
I did.
Yes. Just talk us through your days. Then. So day one cartoon. Where did you start?
So I did scribbles the whole week, and then
that true, ladies and gentlemen, I can confirm that he was busy with the sketch.
I usually the way I work are stacks of index cards, and I usually just capture observations. Some of these may still turn into cartoons at some point, but I gave myself the challenge.
Can lines.
I gave myself the challenge of having one finished cartoon for every day, things I sort of observed. So I'll give sort of day one. I had to do something related to the yachts here because it is kind of
it would be rude not to.
So I have a few people standing in front of a yacht, and somebody's saying, hopefully someone will show up to our 5-course breakfast yacht panel on marketing and effectiveness. Right. And it's this big empty yacht with 2 sort of director's chairs for the speakers. And
do you know, this is Cannes panic. Honestly, I can tell you this because having hosted lots of events here, having done a few talks here and a few panels, you get that horrific feeling of like, I've put all this work in 4 months. I mean, Orlando and I were speaking on the forum stage about the extraordinary cost of being dull. And I can tell, we're both grown men. We've both got experience, we both know what we're good at, but we were literally kind of like little schoolboys boys in the backstage, kind of like poking between the curtain, looking, is anyone going to come to our talk?
I can believe that.
But by the way, for anyone listening and watching, it was sold out. In fact, not just sold out. In fact, they were turning people away. So that was lovely, actually. So I was very pleased. So fortunately, I didn't fall foul of the super experience. But I do know, actually, talking to a lot of people, that is a common experience. Because what happens is people just sign up to everything because there's often no limit. So people have like 15 wristbands from different beach passes or whatever, and they just sort of, go wherever they feel like going at the time. So you have to overbook the event and then hope the right number turn up.
Totally. And I thought too, the theme of marketing effectiveness, I have seen pop up here. It's a reminder, we're all working with limited resources and budgets and everything like that.
Well, good for you to say that, actually. I must pay special credit to the Cannes Lions team because they committed to marketing effectiveness sort of 3 or 4 years ago as a separate track. They call them tracks in terms of like kind of thematic events they put on. This year is the biggest marketing effectiveness track, and they've promoted, things like the talk I did. Fantastic. Orlando talks with Sir John Hegarty's on an even bigger stage on Friday. Mark Ritson was on a huge stage at the Rotunda. So, we would have been on the kind of periphery in the small, dark, kind of like underground cages of kind of, of rooms before, but actually they are promoting. And what's lovely is, and I mean, I'm all about effectiveness, as you know. What is great is they're the ones, apparently, those events, the effectiveness track, are the most oversubscribed and most attended.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's lovely, isn't it? Because like my criticism of Cannes has always been, we're celebrating the work, but we're not recognizing the one person not here is the customer.
That's right.
The people for whom the work is made.
100%.
And unless they're going to buy the work, unless they're going to buy the thing we're selling, there's no point.
That's exactly right.
So I'm encouraged by that. So long may that continue. And, we'll see what happens next year. So day 2, where did you go day 2?
Day 2, I was struck by the fact that for the first time, humor is being talked about in a really big way at Cannes, and particularly coming after some of what we were describing, the COVID years, how humor was sort of downplayed, or this year it was really talked about. I've heard it variously described that humor is a whole separate category at Cannes. I've heard it described as 13 separate subcategories, and I've heard it described as a new criteria for evaluating the work. I haven't gotten a straight answer to that yet.
I don't know either. Yeah.
But in any case, it's talked about a lot. So I wanted to do something on humor and the fact that people are talking about incorporating it more, but it can be a challenge figuring out the right way to do that. So I had a cartoon of people at a dinner and somebody sitting down with an agency saying, apparently humor is making a comeback in advertising. As our agency, can you do something funny? And unbeknownst to the speaker, somebody from the agency is sliding a whoopee cushion under the chair. And so that was just
it's performative, isn't it? I mean, like you're saying earlier, some people have flown in comedians, haven't they? Just to talk about humor. But actually, one of the things I love about what you do is the everyday humor, and actually just the observational humor. It can be quite small things that we're very familiar with. You don't have to make a world class joke. Humor can be very small and observational, can't it?
It really can. We don't have to be stand-up comedians. It's something that we all do with our friends.
Yeah,
we just sometimes hold that back.
In
fact, I had the chance to be a cartoonist in residence at Stanford's Graduate School of Business's first ever course on the power of humor in business. And the two professors have been sort of pioneering this course. And they had this research that had this enormous global panel that measures the number of times an average person laughs over the course of their day. And then they track that over their life. And they found that it kind of keeps ramping up until university. And right after university and our first job, it drops off a cliff. And they call it the humor cliff. Drops off a cliff, and then it starts to creep up a few years after retirement. And their big message is, don't fall off the humor cliff.
That's interesting.
And I feel like if we can bring that more into our life and our work, it makes us more effective at our jobs. And ultimately, it's something for everyone. We need to tap into it more, because it has a great advantage.
You've just given me an idea, actually. So at System 1, we do, because for our customers, we do a thing called the face trace, which is asking consumers, what emotion are you feeling as you watch the ad? Now, what we're trying to do is encourage more positive emotion like happiness and surprise. And the correlation between those emotions and success in market is really well documented and very powerful. Now, just so everyone knows, we apply that to ourselves internally in System 1, right? So we do this thing called the satisfaction, which is we ask the same questions. How do you feel about your work? How strongly do you feel and why do you feel it? Sort of thing. And what's lovely is over the last kind of 5 or 6 quarters, our happiness score has consistently gone up every single quarter, and our performance exactly matches it.
Oh, fantastic.
It's really, the correlation is, now I think it's cause and effect.
Yes.
Because I think successful teams feel happier. If you're getting a bonus, you feel happy. If you're hiring extra staff, you feel happy, right? So I think it's both cause and effect, but also happy teams are more likely to be successful teams. But going back to my previous point, if humour's the second most effective, and Schadenfreude probably is a kind of humour, isn't it? So we'll bundle those together. But let's say humour's most effective form of happiness, I should actually be tracking humour, shouldn't I? I should be actually tracking how many times have you laughed today,
yes,
as the determinant of a happy team, a successful team.
It's a great
That'd be kind of cool.
A great barometer.
Have you ever come across an actual company where they track humour in any kind of way?
I haven't. Any sort of quantitative way. I haven't.
Yeah.
I've seen it at an individual executive level as a personal challenge.
Yeah.
But nothing beyond that. I think it's a great idea.
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
It
Yeah,
would
to
be.
experiment
It would be.
with that. That'd be kind of fun.
Yes.
So take us day 3. What happened on day 3 for you?
Okay, so day 3 related a little bit to what we were talking about, going to see the work,
Yeah.
and how surprised I was that it required going to a basement inside the main conference center, which again had a lot
dungeon.
of great things, but it was quite a giant room and a little bit difficult to navigate. And so I have wall after wall after wall after wall of the gallery of the work, much of which are on these tiny little posters. And so I have a few people there, marketers looking for their own work, and somebody saying, "There's our campaign. See, I told you it was a big idea," pointing at this tiny little postage stamp.
Brilliant. That's very good. Very, very good. And it's very true, by the way. So anyone who is going to come to Cannes, that you're literally in the basement. So you're in the very bottom of the Palais.
Yes.
Kind of, lighting's quite low and all that sort of thing. So no, that's very, very, very true. And it's a bit of a shame, isn't it? I mean, I suppose the good thing is the work does get shared, doesn't it, on the Lions website and that kind of thing. So you can go and look at it after. But yeah, it feels like it should get a little bit more of a hero status, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
and a bit more of a light shone on it.
I think so, because a few of the examples I saw, again, were brilliant. I saw some great examples that I would have loved to have seen in a bigger way.
The category there's one category that disappointed me this year, I have to confess, which is I'm a big fan of B2B marketing. I wasn't always, actually. I spent my career in B2C, but once I've got into B2B, I've discovered that actually B2B works a lot like B2C. People buy things on emotion, relationships, have they heard of you? All the things that we know work for kind of consumer brands, funnily enough, also work in B2B. But actually the understanding of how marketing works in B2B seems to be much less, and less money is spent, and less time invested and all that kind of thing. And the role of the CMO seems to be sort of more of a support act in B2B, whereas a CMO in a B2C company is kind of like the rock star that's setting the strategy and doing all the stuff that everyone else sees, right? B2B, it's more like, can you do a trade stand and, print out a few flyers? Sorry, B2B. I get a flood of B2B CMOs that go, our job is not that. Anyway, so apologies for the influx of mail on that one. Anyway, so Cannes Lions, I think last year or the year before, introduced a new B2B line. Now, another question for you. Can you guess which brand won the B2B line this year? Because it was a bit of a surprise.
That's difficult. I might pick something like Salesforce or something. I'm not sure.
Well, I would have thought that, right? So when someone said to me last night, "Oh, who do you think's won?" And I was going through my head, going, "Yeah, who are the really big kind of like SAP or Salesforce, HP, the big tech businesses that do all the kind of big deals, kind of business." Heineken. I'm like, what's beer doing in B2B? Now, I mean, apparently the idea was something along the lines of kind of like they wanted to kind of restore these pubs that have kind of closed down. They're going to turn them into museums. Well, lovely, great. It's a contribution to the economy and history. Fantastic. But that's not B2B. I mean, in which person's definition is that B2B? It's not a company that relies on transactional relationships between businesses for their success. I mean, okay, the supply chain of getting the beer to the consumer involves doing a transaction with a pub, but that's the same for everything. I mean, B2C brands all go through distribution networks, right?
Yes.
Sounds totally insane. So I thought for next year, we should basically create a new agency called the B2B Marketing. It would come up with a fancy name, but what we should do is basically go to that museum, go to the museum, get Heineken on draft installed in there, and basically we should just do this film of coming up with a new B2B idea. And we go, thousands of people were disappointed by Lions nominating Heineken for this B2B award. We thought this is unacceptable, so we're going to take over the very place, the museum, and we're going to come up with a new idea.
Brilliant.
And then millions of people saw it. I thought what we could do actually, because we need a bit of purpose. Okay, because you have to have purpose. So what we could do is enlist one of the world's most successful B2B brands and say, we're going to have a night in a museum, and you've got the night to come up with something that will change the world forever and bring all your developers. We'll try and solve humanity overnight and do something real that serves B2B businesses everywhere or something. Anyway, that's my plan for next year. I'll turn it into a case study. Day 4, where do you go next?
Yeah, so day 4, I spent a lot of time walking around with my sketchbooks and note cards, just listening to conversations, and there's something kind of surreal walking around Cannes, and it's this beautiful town with these cobblestone streets, and you hear people talking about customer obsession and marketing terms. So I have 2 people in the conversation, and one is saying, and then the brand promise ladders up to higher order benefits of world togetherness. And the other person is saying, what brand? And he says, my personal brand.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. That's brilliant. So what next?
Yeah, so day 5, this is the return, leaving.
We're building up here to a peak end.
I know. It's such a lovely place here. It's hard to imagine the world outside in some ways. But I have somebody walking down the big steps, at the Palais, the big center, and saying, I am so inspired to unleash my creativity back at work. And then the next panel is in a dreary conference room and all presenting work, and everybody's saying, seems risky. It's too different, and make the logo bigger.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is so true. That is so true. I remember actually, I did a week away on a kind of management development course, and I was so inspired. But we had to write a personal statement by the Friday and a vision, and we had to look at what our skills were, what the company need was, and where the overlap, and write a kind of plan or something. I remember I did it all on the kind of post-it notes and a flip chart. I remember phoning the sales and marketing directors at the company I worked for. I was quite junior at this point, so these were kind of like the god level people in the organization. I'm so inspired by the idea. Can I buy you breakfast on the Monday morning? And I remember it was like literally we're on the industrial estate, it's pouring with rain, like the heating wasn't on, they were in a grump, and I walked in with these kind of post-it notes, and I did not feel the kind of inspiration that I had on the sunny out in the garden, the lawns of this mansion house on Friday kind of thing. And I remember this awkward kind of, well, it did make sense last week. Yes. Is it okay if I polish it up a bit and come back in a PowerPoint or something? My idea, actually, to be fair to me, my idea did actually end up happening, which is one of the most proud things in my career. Because I basically wanted to create a separate innovation department, a launch department, basically to manage, I call it seed brands, but manage all the innovation brands and the brands that have maybe, died a bit and could resurrect them, sort of thing. But it needs to be managed sort of aside from the company, so its own sales and marketing team and distribution, that kind of thing. So that was the idea. And but yeah, I mean, so it did eventually get a PowerPoint sign off and all the rest of it. But I remember that feeling at the moment. It was like I was so fired up on Friday.
We forget about that even in big ways and small ways. That is actually where creativity shows up the most. Is how you navigate the march through the organization with all the gatekeepers and stage gates. How do you make an idea come to life without it getting watered down so that the point that it reaches the end is sort of a pale shadow of the original idea? I did this cartoon once of Newton sitting under the apple tree waiting for inspiration to fall, and the apple falls, and then they're just chunks taken out of the apple over time.
Yeah.
And then the last panel is just a can of applesauce.
Yeah.
And I think we have to watch out for Newton's applesauce.
We do.
Because that watering down effect. That is the vast majority of what happens.
Yeah.
Because it's the path of least resistance.
It is.
And it's not it's not survival of the fittest idea that wins. It's survival of the safest idea that usually wins. And so you have to be brave as a marketer to go through that gauntlet to fight for your ideas, to get to a place where your idea stays remarkable in execution. And when you can find a way to do it, those are the ones that really make an impact and stand the test of time.
That's very good advice. I remember having Mike Cesario, the founder of Liquid Death, on the podcast, and he said it very, very well. He just said, your idea is worth $0, right? It is all in the execution. And I think he's right, is that, an idea starts as something that's actually worth nothing until you can find a way to execute it.
That's right.
And execute it well. Now, I was very pleased, by the way. You actually made a cartoon for me, didn't you? Just to round off our week. But,
I did.
Yeah, that was very kind of you. What was in that cartoon? He says rather nervously.
People do get nervous around me sometimes when they see me scribbling away. Like, exactly, where is this going to end up? But in this case, I got your permission to do it.
You did, yeah.
And you have the cartoon there. I got to get the exact lingo.
Yes.
But there was a conversation you had with
Which, actually, should I set the scene on this one?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
the very lovely people at Boston Consulting Group and Marketing Society asked me to join their panel, and Sophie Devonshire, who's absolutely wonderful, was introducing me, and it was quite interesting how she introduced me. So, it wasn't like an amazingly successful marketing career and he's broken through and done some enormous innovation or anything like that. It was, John's been fired twice and he loves to talk about it. And it's quite reassuring to know that we've got somebody in marketing that can share their failures that we can all learn from.
Yes.
I'm happy to be of service, But it did make me smile, and but she meant it lovingly, and it was very sweet. But there's something about being refreshingly honest about some of the difficulties, that I faced in my career that people actually really appreciate.
They really do.
It's kind of that self-deprecating humor can kind of give other people permission. So I've decided that being fired twice is a badge of honor.
It is.
So when the mic was handed over, I said, "Oh yeah, you know that phrase, those that can't teach? Those that get fired start a podcast." And I think I mentioned it to you, didn't I, that night? You didn't forget it.
It's such a good line. Yes. So yes, this is my cartoon as basically in a podcast studio, you saying that line. There we go. I had to capture it.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much. That will make its way to LinkedIn, I'm sure, very shortly. So look out for it. Tom, it's been an absolute blast, mate. Thank you for coming on the show. I've loved hanging out with you this week. It's
so much fun. Really appreciate your hospitality. The whole group at System One has been lovely. It's been really great to get to know everybody.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an honor. Thank you, mate.
Thank you.
Till next time.
Awesome. Sure.
Thank you very much for listening or watching Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching, hit subscribe there as well. I'd also love to get a review. Reviews make a big difference on other people discovering the show. So please do leave a review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to contact me, you can do. I'm over on X at UncensoredCMO or on LinkedIn, where I'm under my own name, John Evans. Thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.